Hi, welcome back to another video. The Quadratus Lumborum trigger points play a prominent role in chronic lower back pain, and in fact, the QL is known to be the master of lower back pain. And if you're looking to become their master, there are some important things that you need to know. So watch till the end of today's video. I want to show you how you can permanently loosen your tight QL, and while there's an infinite number of QL stretches out there, I don't see too many people actually talking about why the QL is tight in the first place. And then what you need to do to permanently stop that tissue from wanting to be tight going forwards. But before we dive into all this, please do me a small favor by hitting the like button, subscribe and sharing your thoughts or feedback in the comments below. And I also just need to make you aware that these recommendations are not going to be suitable for everyone. Do get checked out before you give them a try, and if they do cause you any pain, just avoid them. And in order to make sense of the corrective exercises for your QL, it is important to get a good understanding of the functional anatomy of this muscle. So anatomically, the QL originates from the iliac crest of our pelvis and inserts onto the transverse processes of L1 to L5 and the lower part of the 12th rib. When your QL contracts on both sides, it causes spinal extension. When it contracts on one side, it causes lateral flexion of the trunk. So when the QL gets tight or short on both sides, it can create extension of the lower back. Unilateral tightness can create side bending, and it can pull the shoulder down and hike the hip up on that side. And traditionally, we think of stretching the QL unilaterally just by leaning off to one side. But clinically, its anatomical shape and position means that we need to bend away from that side, and we need to bend forward a little bit, and then we need to rotate back to that same side to best expose some of that QL tightness. You can do this stretch seated or standing, whatever feels best for you. So as to gauge the effectiveness of the subsequent exercises, you first need to take note of how tight or restricted it feels through that side of your back, and then compare it to the other side. Because the first exercise, we're not trying to stretch the muscle, but we're trying to get to the underlying joint stiffness that might be causing the muscular tightness in the first place. So once you have established your baseline, we need to go looking for the underlying root cause of what is asking the QL muscle to be tight over time. Remember, the QL anchors onto your spine, rib cage and your pelvis. If there's any joint restrictions within that area, these can prompt your brain to ask for help from the QL muscle by tightening it up. So these can be one of the main foundational reasons behind why the QL is tight. Well, to address this, you need to use either a trigger point ball or foam roller, one that feels that gives you the best access to the deeper joint stiffness. Well, I'm going to use a foam roller today, and I'm going to start at the base of my rib cage and systematically work my way down with the objective to get a sense of the location of my stiffness and the side of my spine that feels stiffer. So I start at the base of my rib cage. The objective here is not to roll around my muscle tissues. What I'm trying to do with this roller is to get underneath that muscular tightness and actively looking for any spinal or rib joints that might be stiff or restricted. You can do this either with your bottom on the floor like this, with your hand behind your head, and move the roller up and down until you feel you hit the segment that feels a bit stiffer or harder. The other option is to bridge your bottom up, have your head supported with your hands on the ground, and looking for the joint stiffness from that position. We also want to make sure that we roll from one side to the other to get the best sense of which side feels more restricted, not necessarily the side that feels more tender or uncomfortable. Because the goal here is that even if you feel you have a bunch of QL tightness on your right hand side, if you find that the joint underneath on the left hand side are stiffer, then that's actually the side that we want to try and mobilize, because it could be that tightness that is affecting both sides. Now, when you're mobilizing a stiff joint area, you want to make sure that you can take a deep breath or two into this position and stay here and allow the roller or the ball to respectfully press into these areas, asking them to mobilize. And once you have spent 30 seconds or minutes, we then want to move the roller up or down a little bit and go looking for the next area of joint tightness or restriction. We want to stay here for another 30 seconds to 1 minute. And then we want to systematically work our way up and down from that point, capturing every spinal level and every spinal joint and rib joint that might be contributing to some of that QL tightness. Now we need to reassess our QL tightness with the previous QL stretch and see if you can now go a little bit deeper now after you have released the joint tightness. There has to be a reason why those exact segments and those exact joints on that exact side have become stiff, tight and restricted. And we're going to come back to what that might be for you at the end of this video. Now once you have mobilized those deeper underlying joint restrictions, we need to stretch our QL muscle. Obviously, there are many ways that you can potentially stretch your QL. I've done a video on these stretches in the past. But now let's consider the functional anatomy of your QL. If we remember that just bending to one side, we put some tension through that QL. But because it has some capacity to move your spine into different directions, so we need to add a little bit of flexion and a little bit of contralateral or opposite rotation into the mix to truly expose the most of that tightness. Let's sit with cross leg on the floor. From here, just bend off to one side, lean forward a little bit and then rotate back to that same side. And you can have your elbow on your leg to really pull you into that position further. Now traditionally, we hold the stretch for 30 seconds to a minute, but this is nowhere near as effective as we both want it to be and it needs to be to promote change. So instead of simply holding this position for 30 seconds to a minute, what we need to do instead is that we need to find a way to tense up that QL spot, that tight spot that we found. We need to tense it up for 10 to 5 seconds. This may mean squeezing your butt or just squeezing all the musculature in your back. It doesn't really matter, because what this does is to create a reflex in your brain that when you stop tensing that tissue will reflexively relax a little bit, and then you should find that you can go even further into that stretch. So this is PNF stretching for your QL, which is essentially a process of tensing that tissue as hard as you can for 5 seconds, relaxing, letting it give, going further and further. Another way to address a tight QL on one side or both sides is to get a 45-degree hyperextension. Simply just lying over this piece of equipment in a position of inversion will allow us to get length and flexion through that lower back, which will help to create the length through this muscle that we're looking for. This is really good for down-regulating tension in that body and decompressing that spine, because a tight QL compresses the lower back vertebrae and subsequently a lot of the upper segments of the vertebrae over time. If you don't have this piece of equipment, you could do this on a bench with a pillow like this you're seeing right here. If you have lower back pain, a lower shoulder or a high hip on the same side, then that is likely an indication you have a tight QL on that side. So doing something on that same piece of equipment but laying over it in this particular way can be really good for driving length through the QL. The goal here is to really help use the breath to open up the rib cage, because that tight QL is pulling the rib cage down on this side, so we want to help create length through the ribs. And we can do that by adding a little bit of an overhead reach and really emphasizing the in and out breath. So every time when you inhale, you should feel some nice stretch and expansion on that side that you're stretching out. But simply stretching the QL on its own may never get you to a stage where you never have to keep stretching that tissue, unless you also address the underlying cause of what is asking that tissue to be tight in the first place. So the next thing we need to do before we address the underlying cause is to strengthen our QL, and essentially try to replace some muscular tightness and joint stiffness with more strength and stability. Now, considering the anatomy of our QL, like how we have different ways to stretch it, we have 2 different ways that we can strengthen that muscle. One is by keeping the top half steady and doing a hip hike. So we're trying to pull the hip up as high as we can, asking that QL to function. But this particular exercise is a little bit harder to scale because you might need to put a weight on your leg, which can be a little bit awkward for some people. But the other version of this is the reverse, where we keep your leg stable. We just think of tilting your torso from side to side. Now obviously, this is easy to scale because we can grab a weight. Say to stretch my left QL, stand up straight with your feet hip width apart, engage your core and squeeze your glutes to posteriorly tilt your pelvis. Slowly lower the weight down towards your right foot as far as you can, and then in the same plane of motion, engage your left QL muscle to come back up, all the way over to the left. So you're not stopping in the midline, but going all the way across. So to achieve a full range of motion and to get your QL to work to its full capacity. Now, once you've become proficient with this exercise, instead of just laterally flexing your spine all the way down, we can gently bend to the side and then bend forward slightly. And then again, coming all the way back and then all the way over in that new plane of motion that we have just created. And as we have mentioned before, because the QL isn't just a lateral flexor, there is some element of flexion and rotation at the same time. But if you're currently suffering from back pain, or if this is a new exercise or new movement pattern for you, start with only lateral flexion, do your 3 sets of 12 and attempt to find some muscle fatigue. And then once you have been able to do your lateral flexion with some flexion, then we can now incorporate some element of spinal rotation at the same time. You're starting to twist your shoulders to the side of the QL to be stretched. Be sure that you are doing that in a controlled motion, and after performing 10 to 12 reps without weight to begin with, then you can try adding light weights into the mix and looking for that genuine fatigue through the side of your spine. And our overall objective is to strengthen our QL to prevent it from needing to tighten up again in the future. Finally, once you have done the above corrective exercises, we need to establish why we need to perform them in the first place, so that you don't have to keep doing them long term into the future. So once you have mobilized those stiff joints, you have found an effective way to stretch and strengthen your QL, we now need to establish the genuine reason why the exact part of the spine on that side, in that area, has become stiff, tight, and restricted. Well, when we're dealing with spinal dysfunction in any capacity, let alone for the context of this video, is that we need to pay attention to the shapes, the positions, and the postures you put those tissues into the most throughout your day. That doesn't generally relate to our active positions. It is often more of a reflection of our stationary, sedentary type shapes that we get into. So if you spend any length of time throughout your day sitting at a desk, sitting at a couch, driving a car, standing, bending over a desk or a bench, or you are out gardening, the area of your spine that becomes stiff, tight and restricted is very likely to be the section of your back that you might be unknowingly hinging through or relaxing through or bending through for the majority of time that you are in that shape. And because the body is an adapted piece of machinery, if you put a hinge through your spine for long enough, your brain then needs to stiffen, tighten and restrict that area to allow you to either do it better or to support or protect the things that you are doing at that moment. As always, I genuinely hope that this video was helpful and insightful. If it was, please let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and until next week, take care. Thank you for watching until the end. If you like this video, please click the like button. Please leave your comments below and share this video. Hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of my future weekly video release. Please also subscribe to this channel. This is free of charge, but will help the channel to grow. If you're interested in improving your health and fitness or losing weight, if you suffer from or wish to prevent back pain, please take a look at my book, which is now available from Amazon worldwide. Thank you.